Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jon.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you. Well, hello everyone. How are we today? I know you had a long session. By the way, I'm aware that there has been some issues with the microphone. Everybody can hear me okay? Is it too loud? All good? Okay, perfect. Now, what I would like to do first, actually, before we dive into the topic of mindfulness, which is one of my passions because it helped me a lot to live a conscious and a happier life, I'm going to share my story with you during this presentation as well. But I know it's been a long day. I know you've been learning a lot. So if you don't mind, just stand up for a moment. And please turn to your right. Ah, right, my right, your right, yes. And please give the person in front of you a nice massage. Now, please turn around and return the favor. Make the person relax, let go of your stress, let go of your day. This is the last presentation of today, so you're almost done. And come back to your seats. Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's get started. As Louise mentioned, I'm a registered counselor and a mindfulness educator, and I've been practicing mindfulness for over 10 years now. And I can definitely tell you that it has changed my life. If you put the effort in, it will change yours as well. So today we're going to talk about what mindfulness is and how can we use it to live better. Let me ask you first, who in this room hasn't heard of the term mindfulness before? Or let me rephrase it, who has heard the term mindfulness? Please put your hand up. Okay, I can go then. Okay. So let's have a look at what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with the definition of mindfulness, what it is and what it isn't. We're going to cover some myths. We're going to look at the changes and challenges that we have in our day-to-day living today. We're going to have a look at stress and how can we find better ways to deal with this stress. By the way, this presentation is already online, so you don't have to take any notes. I will share the link at the end of the session, so you don't have to write anything. We're going to look at benefits of mindfulness. I'm going to give you some tips around how you can start cultivating mindfulness in your life from my experience in the past 10 years when I've been practicing. And at the end, we're going to finish with a 5-minute of guided mindfulness practice. Simply because mindfulness only works if you practice it. Hearing me speak here today, watching YouTube videos, reading books about mindfulness is great because it's going to get you excited, interested about the topic, but the benefits you will get only if you are practicing this. So I'll be frank with you. The more effort you put in, the more gain you're going to make out of it. So let's get started. What is mindfulness? Now, whenever I give one of these sessions, I often ask the audience what mindfulness is, and the responses I often get is being present, living in the moment, noticing what's happening, which is all correct. Now, if I ask you, where are you right now? Obviously, you'll say, well, I'm here listening to you. Your body is here, but where is your mind? Now, our minds have this wonderful ability to, go into the past or go into the future, which is very helpful at times. We can problem solve, we can think creatively, you can work. As teachers, this is what you need. You need your mind to work. but it can also go to the past and hang up in the past regrets. Or it can go to the future and start worrying, catastrophizing, going into what-if thoughts. So mindfulness really helps us to pull back from that busy mind. So what we can start seeing is our thought processes as they come up. And guess what? We have around 60,000 thoughts every single day, on average. How many of them are you aware of? Not many? All right, something to ponder upon, okay? So let's have a look at the concept of mind wandering, or some people describe it as living in an autopilot mode. Whenever you're doing a simple task such as driving to work or washing dishes or whatever that might be, your mind could be miles away from what you're actually doing, right? You might be thinking about your lesson for the next day, or planning your holiday in 2 months, or thinking about the wonderful night you had with your partner, whatever that might be, okay? A recent study by a psychologist called Matt Killingsworth found out, so what Matt did was actually, he tracked down 15,000 people from all around the world by using a simple mobile application. He would ask them 3 questions. What are you doing right now? What are you thinking right now? And a short time later, he would ask a 3rd question. How are you feeling? Now, Matt found out that 47% of the time, almost half of the time, people were thinking about something else than what they were actually doing. So they were not present, they were not mindful. And you might ask the question, what's so bad about mind wandering? He also found out that there was a strong relationship between mind wandering now and being unhappy a short time later. So whenever you are not present with what you're doing, you are contributing to your unhappiness later on. Now, I think this is quite significant because we have 24 hours in a day. We sleep 7 to 8 hours. I hope you do, because it is really essential in our busy lives today. So we have 16 hours left to do whatever we want to do. And if we lose another 8 hours because we're not simply present, we got only 8 hours left to create a life that we want to live. Not much, is it? Okay, so let's have a look at the definition of mindfulness. And I'd like to quote Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is one of the pioneers in this work. He has been involved in mindfulness since 1970s. Actually, he's the person who brought mindfulness from Eastern philosophies into Western psychology. He created this program called mindfulness-based stress reduction, and he was having, or he's still having, phenomenal results since 1970s. Reduced anxiety, reduced depression, reduced stress, reduced pain. Jon defines mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. I also would like to give you my understanding of mindfulness. To me, mindfulness is cultivating present moment awareness with kindness and compassion. If you imagine mindfulness as a bird with 2 big wings, one of those wings is being present, noticing what's happening right now. But the other one is kindness and compassion. Why? Simply because we can be very, very judgmental and critical, not only towards others, but also towards ourselves. Now, who can relate to this inner critic, that nagging voice inside of your heads, especially when you fail at something or when you make a mistake? I've seen a couple of hands go up here. So mindfulness gives us this opportunity to pull back from this mind and see clearly what is really happening in the background. And let me tell you this, you don't have to believe everything that your mind tells you. All right? Okay. Let's move on. Why do we need mindfulness? Let's have a look at some facts. In year 2000, our attention span was 12 seconds. Not long. However, we saw a an immense decrease in 2013. It dropped down to 8 seconds. Now, 8 seconds of an attention span is actually 1 second less than the attention span of a goldfish. So what we're seeing here is that we are losing our ability to focus and pay attention to what we're doing. And this is what we need in our work environment. When you're planning your lesson, if your mind is wandering off all the time, you will need double the amount of time to simply prepare your lesson or do whatever you need to do. Now, a mobile phone user checks their phone on average 100 times a day. So we're getting into this addictive behavior here, right? And an average office worker checks their emails around 30 times per hour. Okay, so you're getting an idea about how we use the technology today, right? So it is becoming an addiction for many people because we can't just be still and be present with ourselves. We constantly have to do something on our phones, on our mobile, check something. Okay, so things to keep in mind from today's session. What are some challenges that we're facing today? First of all, I believe one of the biggest challenges is actually the information overload that we're faced with. Right? We are bombarded with different things within those 24 hours. Okay, and also we live in a very fast-paced environment. Okay, we've got to get going, we've got to be quick. So this creates a lot of stress, anxiety, and over the long run, burnout. Because this is what it is. Everybody has a limit in terms of how much stress we can carry in our lives. This also leads to sleep deprivation and exhaustion. Right? I work with people who can't handle the life stresses any longer. Work or private life, whatever that might be. So what can we do? Let's have a look at some of the changes that we're seeing today. Now, this is a picture, and some of the classrooms might look like this. I don't know what your classroom looks like, but before going into psychology, I was actually teaching English as a second language like most of you do today. And one of the biggest problems that I faced within those 4 years was that the school I was working with at the time didn't have any policy around how to use the technology, so the students will be on their phones. Whenever I was writing something on the board or not paying attention to what they were doing, then they'll be checking Facebook, they'll be checking emails, they'll be doing whatever they're doing, so they weren't really engaging with what I was teaching at the time. Became a big problem for me. So how can you start bringing technology? And I'm not saying technology is right or wrong or good or bad. It is about how we use the technology. In another school I taught, they actually made a really good effect in terms of technology. They started organizing iPad lessons, right? Twice a week. The teachers we would teach on iPads. The students will have iPads. But the rest of the time, the students weren't allowed to have their phones on the tables. If they did, then there would be some sort of a punishment involved. So I want you to think around how can you start bringing this etiquette, technology etiquette in your classrooms, in your schools. Because let alone, technology can really take over. So it will affect the quality of the lessons that you teach. How can we use the technology better? I want you to start reflecting on your usage. Are you using it too much? Are we actually on the verge of an addiction here? And the first step of the recovery moment or movement, so to speak, is to realize that what you're doing is not working. And if it's working for you, that's great. Keep doing what you're doing. But I want you to start thinking about how much technology do you use in your everyday life? And how does that get away or get in the way when you connect with other people or, when you need to be quiet and reflect and just rejuvenate? I would suggest starting and ending your days mindfully without technology. Let me ask you, how many of you go to bed with your phones? Please put your hand up. Okay, yeah. Okay. And don't get me wrong, I used to do that as well. That's what I would do. I would wake up and I would go to my computer, I would check Facebook, who replied to my comments, who liked my postings or whatever. I don't do that anymore. So what I do personally in my life is that I put my mobile phone on flight mode just about an hour before I go to bed. Then I do my meditation. I wake up the next morning without technology. I do my yoga. I do my meditation again. I have breakfast and then I switch it on. This gives me enough time to, detox from the technology. So it works for me. What kind of ways can you find in your life that will work for you? Okay? And I'll mention a study at Volkswagen in Germany. What they did was they built this system. I don't know how they did it exactly, but after work hours, after 6 o'clock, the managers weren't allowed to send any more emails. So what they've seen was actually the productivity rates went up a couple of months later. So this really shows that all of us need this downtime away from work, away from technology, so we can actually start connecting with each other, with ourselves, okay? We all do, and mindfulness will give you this time to basically switch everything off and be with yourself. Connect to people without devices. Now, sometimes I see people when I go for a walk in a park nearby where I live, a family, with a kid, and the kid will be on the iPad watching a cartoon. The father will be on his device, the mother will be on Facebook. So there was really no communication at all, which is very sad. We go to restaurants, we see people not talking to each other, but talking almost through texting. So think about, how do you use it in your daily life? Are you overusing it? And how can you find better ways to use it more effectively? We talked about this before, technology etiquette in the classroom, okay? Talk to your colleagues, talk to your directors of studies, whatever works for you. Okay, we're gonna move on to another big topic, which is multitasking. Any multitaskers in the room? Yeah. Okay, great. I hope your multitasking doesn't look like this. Now, I'm going to, let's start with the myth of the woman can multitask, man can't, right? And I'm sorry to give you the bad news, ladies. It doesn't work for neither of us. Okay? The research shows that our brains can only pay attention to one thing or focus on one thing at one particular time. So whenever you're thinking that you're multitasking, you're actually switching your attention back and forward without realizing it. I also want to make clear, what is simple multitasking, what's complex multitasking. And simple multitasking will be you're walking down the street and you're chewing gum. We still can do that effectively. What we're talking here is a complex multitasking. Basically, you're planning your lesson, and then your colleague walks over and asks you a question. So, and you try to do two things at once, or talking on the phone and lesson planning or whatever, it doesn't work. And if you try to do it, what happens is it increases your stress. It increases the fatigue. You'll be tired at the end of the day. And it reduces your performance. Simply because every time you switch your attention back and forward, you lose 0.05 seconds of your time. Not a significant time if you do it once or twice, but if you keep doing it on an ongoing basis every day, it does become a problem. So what I would suggest here is something called effective attention switching. Doing one thing at a time with full attention and presence, basically being mindful. And people who have been doing this reported that they felt less tired at the end of the day, and they got done a lot more. Now, how it looks. Okay, so for example, you're planning your lesson, your colleague comes over. You leave your lesson plan. You are fully present talking to your colleague. She goes away. You come back to your lesson plan. The phone rings. You pick up the phone. You are fully present with the person on the phone. When that ends, you go back to your lesson plan. You're focusing your attention to one thing at a time. That will increase your productivity, and you don't have to stress about it. So maybe something to try on Monday when you go back to work. Okay, let's have a look at stress, which has become the problem in our busy lives. Just to understand how stress works in the body, I'm going to talk to you about what we call stress response. So I'd like to highlight the part which is called the prefrontal cortex. This part of our brain, just located right behind our forehead. This part is it's the executive functioning of our brain. Okay, responsible for logic, creativity, problem solving, planning, thinking, evaluation, and all that kind of stuff. The thing that you need when you are working. Okay? A wonderful part that we all need. So you'll be using this part of your brain 90% of the time when you're at work. We have another part of the brain which is called the limbic system, or the reptilian part of the brain. And I'm pretty sure that most of you have heard the term fight, flight, and freeze response. Right? No one? Okay. Now, the fight, flight, and freeze response is controlled by this little dot there called amygdala. So whenever our body senses a threat in the environment, amygdala switches on the stress response. So what happens next is that, and this is all automatic, you don't have to think about this, thank God, our body goes into the alert state. So we start breathing faster, our heart rate goes up, our digestive system shuts down, our immune system shuts down, because we actually don't need all of that stuff. We need to fight an enemy or escape the situation. So we need all the energy we need at that moment. Now, the wonderful mechanism, it works really well in our daily lives, just because you're all sitting here today, right? Thanks to that system. However, as humans, we can activate the stress response by simply thinking about it. 3 o'clock at night, you just wake up. And you start thinking about, oh my God, what am I going to teach tomorrow? Or what am I going to talk to my boss about? What am I going to say? So you activate the stress response without knowing it. Your body is pumped up, but there's no threat. There's nothing that you can do at that moment. So what mindfulness does is that it helps us to see, oh, is there a real threat right now in my environment, or am I just imagining something? And it can switch the stress response off. Because guess what? If you are operating in that stress response, and I know many people do most of the time, it will have a toll in your physical as well as in your mental health. So how can we manage the stress in a better way? First of all, be mindful. Just notice if there's a real threat. If there's a tiger in this room or a bear, then, yeah, we just have to run for our lives. But, if you're stressing about the lesson plan on Monday, not much that you can do right at this very moment. Take deep breaths. 3 to 5 deep breaths helps us to release this stress response and activate the relaxation that we all need. Get enough sleep, 7 to 8 hours a night, which is very, very important. Once again, we live in this fast-paced world. We need this. Our brain needs this. And socialize, connect to others, or connect with others. Whenever we're stressed, we tend to isolate. Right? So I want you to do the opposite. Just go and talk to someone. Talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, talk to your family. Do whatever it takes. All right. Now we're going to move on to the benefits of mindfulness, but before we do that, I would like to share my story about how I started mindfulness. 10 years ago, I was going through a very rough time in my life. I had lots of family problems. I didn't like the job I was doing. It was a very repetitive job. I didn't have a meaning or purpose to wake up to at the time. I was depressed. So I went to see a doctor, and he prescribed some antidepressants for me. So I remember that first night when I took one of those little tiny pills. It was a quite significant moment in my life. It felt like my brain went into fire. I had random bizarre thoughts. I couldn't sleep all night. So the next morning, I went back to the doctor and said, well, listen, this is not working. Can you give me something else? And what he said shocked me. He said, it takes 4 to 6 weeks until your body gets used to that, so we can start seeing the effects of it. And I said, or I realized at that moment, I had to do something else to deal with what I was going through. So I booked myself into a 10-day silent meditation retreat where we were asked to meditate 10 to 12 hours every day. I'm not advising you to do that. It was very challenging. However, at the end of those 10 days, something shifted within me. I started to see the world from a different perspective. I was happier. I actually had hope. I quit my job. I packed my bags, and actually 6 weeks later, after the course ended, I was sitting on a plane to Australia. So I can definitely say mindfulness has changed my life, and it can change yours as well if you start practicing this. But let's take a look at the scientific research as well. Clinical research shows that mindfulness is very effective in reducing stress, anxiety, depression, and pain. It enhances our cognitive performance, concentration, memory, emotional intelligence. It increases our resilience and self-awareness. And it improves our relationships, our happiness, and in our overall well-being. So this is, you don't have to, there's no side effects to this. Negative side effects, I mean. When you take a pill, there will be side effects into your body. So with mindfulness, you can actually start living a life that you like to live. Some tips I'd like to leave you with. First of all, remember kindness and compassion. I'm going to take you through a 5-minute practice of mindfulness, and you are going to start noticing the mind. Sometimes I call it the monkey mind. It will wander off into the past, into the future. It doesn't want to stay in the present moment. This is a habit pattern of our mind. So just gently bring it back, kindly, compassionately. Don't beat yourself up. Okay, we're trying to change some of the habits that you've been using for most of your life. Okay? Do what excites you. There was a survey asking some people about how they liked their life or their work and what they were doing. 90% of the time people said, I don't like what I do. I'm not satisfied in my life. So for many people, life became a chore. Right? We just get up, we do the same thing over and over again. I want to quote Bronnie Ware here. She was a hospice nurse, Australian hospice nurse, and she was working with people who were dying. And she would ask them questions such as, what's your regret? What do you regret in your life? And she wrote a beautiful book called The Regrets of the Dying. And number one regret in that book was, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So think about that. I don't want you to say this when that time comes for you. Find your passion, find your joy, follow that excitement in your life, and live fearlessly. I think we are afraid far too much in our society. Go for it. Do what excites you. Try at least. You may succeed, you might fail. We don't know that. But at least you've tried. At least you won't have that regret at the end of your life. And of course, practice mindfulness, which we're going to do next. So I'm going to take you through a 5-minute mindfulness exercise so that you get a chance to see what it is and how it works. So this will give you an understanding, and you can start practicing if you like to tonight when you go back home. So, okay. Okay, now sitting comfortably in your chairs, both feet on the ground, and if it's okay with you, just close your eyes. You don't have to. If it's not comfortable, just, look down so you won't get distracted. And I want you to start noticing your whole body sitting here on a chair right now. Noticing your breath flow, the incoming breath, the outgoing breath. Noticing the changes when the breath comes in, the rise of the abdomen, the expansion of your chest. And notice what happens when the breath goes out. Simply observe your breath, which has been with you since your birth, yet we're rarely aware of our breath. So let's take the time to notice our breath. And soon you might notice that your mind has a life of its own. It wanders off into the past, into the future, judgments, labeling, criticizing, commenting, which is all normal. All you need to do is just notice what's on your mind at that moment and simply come back to your breath. Now bring your attention to your feet on the ground. Notice your feet. Once again, notice the chair that you're sitting on, how it's supporting you. And when you're ready, gently come back, opening your eyes in your own time. And I want you to notice if anything has shifted for you. What have you noticed? Are you feeling maybe a little bit more relaxed? This was just 3 minutes of mindfulness. So just become aware. And now, I'm not going to say this is something easy to do. It takes a lot of dedication. However, what we see now from the research is that 10 to 12 minutes of mindfulness every single day starts changing your brain structure. So you can actually cultivate the life that you want to live by simply setting 10 to 15 minutes each day. And I was giving this presentation in a bank, and they like numbers, so they go like, wow, that's 1% of our day, So it's not much. It's not much. All right, we're going to move on. For more information, you can check out my website, consciousbeginnings.com.au. I run a free mindfulness session in West End every Tuesday. If you're interested, that's on Meetup. And this presentation is already online as well. That's the link. And I also run 4 to 8 week mindfulness courses called Conscious Change if you like to deepen and get more into the practice. Okay, I'll just wait a minute. People using the technology to take some pictures, which is great. I mean, it can be used very, very effectively. All right. Now, I would like to close this session with a poem by one of my favorite mystics, Rumi, a 13th century mystic, Sufi mystic. And Rumi says, "You were born with potential. You were born with goodness and trust. You were born with ideals and dreams. You were born with greatness. You were born with wings. You are not meant for crawling, so don't. You have wings. Learn to use them and fly." Thank you.